I can see JC. I can see Esther. You are all welcome to today's class. You are all welcome. I want us to, without wasting much time again, to quickly go into what we have for today. So, what we have for today is we are moving into a new topic, uh, which is business ethics. Business ethics. Business ethics. So we have quite a number of things to discuss today. Okay, so let's begin. Let's begin. Now, today we are going to be looking at the business ethics. Business ethics today. Now, um, let's first of all start with what is ethics. Ethics. Now, ethics is a written and unwritten code of principle and value. Ethics is written and or unwritten code of principle, codes of principle and value that governs decisions and actions within an organization. It governs decision and action within an organization. Business ethics also is described as the good and or bad actions of both individual within an organization and of the organization itself as a corporate body. You know that we have individual, organization itself is a person. We call organization artificial person, that is a legal entity. Now, I was saying that business ethics is seen as written or unwritten code of principle and value that govern decisions and action within an organization. We also say that it can be described as the good or bad actions of both individual within an organization and the organization itself as a whole. And this business ethic is what constitutes the culture of the organization, the do's and don'ts of the organization. That is what business ethics represent. Now, business ethics can be viewed in two different ways. Number one way that it can be viewed is that business ethics can be seen as when company must know the difference between the right and wrong, where a company must know the difference between the right and wrong. And it can be viewed as company must know and choose to do what is right in circumstances in which they find themselves. It is one thing for a company to know the right and what is wrong. There is another thing for company to now choose to do what is right in the circumstances in which they find themselves. Hello, are we together? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Can
Okay.
hear you, sir.
So that is that about business ethics. Now, I want you to follow me because we have quite a long thing to discuss today. Um, Nobody is going to ask you for divine ethics, but first of all, the beginning that will form the basis of what that thing we are going to for you to understand what is even this ethics we are talking about. Ethics, what is it? We say that it is the good or bad actions of individual and organization, all the individuals within an organization and the organization itself. Now, according to ethics international ethics standard board for accountants, it has a code. International Ethics Standard Board for Accountants Code of Ethics, it states that it states that a distinguishing mark for an accountancy profession is its acceptance of the responsibility to act in the public interest. What that statement means is that, according to the International Ethics Standard Board for Accountants, he said that anytime an accountant is acting, the accountant is seen to be acting in the interest of the public. When you go out as an auditor, you went to go and audit a firm, or PwC is auditing, they are acting because the public will rely that, oh, it's PwC that audited the company, so I can rely on the information I see on the face of their audited financials. Oh, it's KPMG that audited them. It's EY that audited them, so I can rely. So it is therefore saying that the accountant, that is why if you look at your question, they will either say, oh, you are undergraduate accountant, or you are a professional accountant undergoing so. They always emphasize who you are in the question. Is because of this issue of ethics. They always say, oh, you are a partly qualified accountant working in an audit firm before that. They will now tell you the story. But they will always say that this is who you are. That is, you are bound to understand this subject of discussion. So the key thing I want us to pick from that, whenever an accountant is seen to be acting in on behalf of the public interest, an accountant has a responsibility to act in the interest of the public. I want us to take note of that fact. And the same International Ethics Standard Board for accountants is established the fundamental principles. It established the fundamental principles of professional ethics, fundamental principles of professional ethics for professional accountants. And we are going to look at those. Now, let me quickly say this. According to accounting professor, according to the standard, that's the International Ethics Standard Board for Accountants. Now, the code, the rule, say that accountancy profession approach to ethics, the way an accountant, our approach to ethics is supposed to be what? Principle based. Principle based. What is the meaning of principle based? It means that different yardstick based on contextual information. That is, it has to be principle based. It has to be applying, don't say, oh, and that is what makes it different from rule based. So ethics is about principle based, not rule. The way I can explain this is like the law of Moses and the law of Jesus. Law of Moses said, thou shalt not kill. If you kill, they will kill you. It is rule. This is what the law says. If you do anything, this. It is under grace you now have flexibility. The same thing when you see rule-based and principle-based, he's talking about, he's saying that the approach of professional accountant to issue of ethics is principle-based. That is it. It is not rule-based. It is not static. That's what he's saying. It is principle-based. You apply different yardstick to different situations. That is what the code, the standard is saying. And the standard is saying that you must identify the threat to comply with the fundamental principle. An accountant must be able to identify the threat to comply with the fundamental principle. An accountant must be able to evaluate the significance of the threat identified. An accountant must apply a safeguards when necessary to eliminate the threats or reduce them to acceptable level. to acceptable level. Now, I want to believe we understand what we are saying here. We are saying that the approach of a professional accountant, because it says that the code, the ethics code, it says that it establishes the fundamental principle for professional accountant. The fundamental principle that an accountant must follow, what you must look out for. Say number one, identify threats. We are going to be discussing different threats to identify the threats, external factor that will what hinder you from complying with the fundamental principle. Evaluate the significance of the threat that you have identified. Evaluate it. Is it something that is material or it's not material? Evaluate it. Then apply safeguards, apply caution in order to eliminate the threat or to reduce them to acceptable level. Now the code now set out the international ethics standard code. It now set out five fundamental principles. Five fundamental principles. You know that we have said that business ethics is principle based, it's not rule based. So it set out five fundamental principles for a professional accountant. Number one out of these five is what? Integrity. Integrity. Number that is a professional accountant must have integrity, must be seen to have integrity. Number two principle is objectivity. Objective. An accountant must be seen to be objective. Objective that is cannot be seen to be biased or have conflict of interest or under any undue influence. So one of the principles say integrity. An accountant must demonstrate what? Integrity. He must be honest, straightforward in the demonstration of your professional duty as an accountant. We are going somewhere. This is like we are preparing the ground for the main area where we are going. So I want you to follow me so that you can get it. Because this thing, when we started talking towards the tail end of today's lecture, these are the things that you must first of all know, that as an accountant you must have integrity. As an accountant you must have objectivity. You must not be biased. Number three of the five fundamental principles is professional competence and duty of care. Professional competence and duty of care. Professional competence and duty of care. Don't forget, according to the international ethics standard for chartered accountant, it says that accountant is seen or has a responsibility to act in the interest of the public. Take note, keep that word on your left finger. We are going somewhere. But first of all, get the five fundamental principles that govern the business ethic according to the standard God of ethics. Number one, we say it's integrity. Number two, objectivity. Accountant must be objective. It must not have biasness. It must not be under any undue influence. Number three is professional competence and duty of care. Number five, number four, confidentiality. Confidentiality, number four. Confidentiality says that in deciding whether to disclose confidential information, a professional accountant must consider the following. Now, the confidentiality is saying that accountant is not permitted to disclose the client information to anybody, but there is an exception. If you are an accountant as a man, you cannot get home and you are discussing corporate information, corporate secret with your spouse at home. It's not allowed. Maybe you discuss with your spouse. Your spouse now went to go and share the information with her friend. It now become an issue. That is not allowed for a professional accountant. We are going somewhere. Oh. We are just preparing the ground. That's confidentiality. As an accountant, the fact that you are going to take a job in company ABC, the place where you are living, you cannot disclose their secrets at the interview. Even if they ask you, say, I'm sorry, I'm an accountant, I can't disclose the information. Because if you disclose it, they are testing you that, oh, this is how you will go and reveal our secrets to another company too. Confidentiality. Then number 5 is professional behavior. Before I go to number 5, there are exceptions to where an accountant can disclose a confidential information when that information is in the interest of all the parties that are involved. If it is in the interest of the party that are involved, if it is required by what? By the body of accountant. If I can write you now, so, that is if it is required by the authority that is more than you, that is more than the kini you are. That is why you can see government, federal government, state government, they can write bank to demand for information, and bank is under compulsion to provide the information to them. A court of law can write the bank, they can write the firm to request for an information, and it must be provided. So the 5 points are integrity, objectivity, professional competence, and duty of care. Number 4, confidentiality. And number 5, professional behavior. An accountant must have a professional behavior in the manner that the person talks and the manner that an accountant composes himself. Don't forget, the standard says that an accountant is seen to be acting on behalf of the public. So you cannot talk anyhow. You have to compose yourself. Now, we are going to look at 5 potential threats, 5 potential threats that may lead to conflict of interest. 5 potential threats that may lead to conflict of interest. Potential threat that may lead to issue of conflict of interest. Number 1 of the threats is self-interest threats. Self-interest threats. What that means is that a situation where an accountant has a self-interest. Imagine you are auditing a company where your wife is working. That is, you already have self-interest in that company. Or where your younger sister is working in account department and you are the one auditing the book. Self-interest threat. There is a threat. Number 2 is self-review threat. Self-review threat. A professional accountant will not appropriately evaluate the result of a previous judgment made or service performed by the professional accountant or another individual within the profession firm. So self-review threat is that that is why if you are being employed to come and take up an audit job, you need to find out who was their auditor before. Who is the internal auditor in the company? You need to review their work. Sometimes you may need to contact them before taking up the work. Even if after you have taken up the work, you need to contact them to know what are the issue on ground. That is what that issue of self-review is talking about. Another threat is advocacy threats. Advocacy threat. When a professional accountant promotes clients position to the point that the professional accountant objectivity is compromised. Advocate, when you are advocating for clients, when you are defending a client as if you were together doing the business. Advocacy threats. These are possible threats. All of these threats, please take note of them because these are things that can come up in a question. They will not ask you directly. It can come up. I'm citing those examples so that when it come up in a question, you will remember that, oh, this is advocacy threats. Oh, this is self-interest threats. Next one after advocacy threat is familiarity threats. Familiarity. When a professional accountant will become too sympathetic to their interest or too receptive to their work. When a professional accountant has a long or close relationship with a client or employer. Familiarity traits. When you are auditing a company and the managing director of the company or the chief accountant of the company, is already your friend, is carrying you home, is buying you gifts. Familiarity traits. When you are looking at it that I cannot write bad report concerning this company, I need to tell the accountant before I do because it's my friend. Familiarity threat. Intimidation threat is the number 5. Remember, we are looking at 5 potential threats that can create conflict of interest, that can lead to conflict of interest and lack of independence. Number 1 of the threat is self-interest threats. Number 2 is self-review threats. Number 3 is advocacy threat, when you are advocating for your client as if you started the company together. Number 4, familiarity threats. And number 5 is intimidation threats. When you are so close to the clients, to the extent that you are afraid that if I dare do this thing, intimidation. That is when there is a situation that the management of the client can intimidate you. Maybe at a point they've already given you a check of 5 million, or they borrow you a loan to resolve a matter. And you know that if I dare go and write rubbish report concerning them, they can ask me to pay back the loan immediately. Where will I get the money? Intimidation. You know that with this type of gift that these people have given me, they carry intimidation as setting. Or the accountant look like inferior to the people that these people, they can buy my family. Intimidation threat. When a professional accountant will be deterred from acting objectively, when a professional accountant is hindered from acting objectively because of actual or perceived pressure, including attempts to exercise undue influence over the professional accountant. That is 5 potential threats that lead to conflict of interest. Now, I want us to go to how to determine whether an action is ethical or not. How to determine whether an action is ethical or not. This area is very important for the purpose of our exam. How would you determine whether an action is ethical or is not? There are 4 ways I'm going to teach us. Number 1 way is use of 4-way tests. The use of 4-way tests. The use of 4-way tests to evaluate a decision. The use of this 4-way test, it means by using 4 questions. There are 4 questions you are going to ask to be able to ascertain whether an action is ethical or is unethical. What are the four questions? Is you ask your question, is the decision or action truthful? Is it truthful? You ask that, is the decision or action fair to everyone affected? Is this decision fair to everyone affected? Or you ask that, will the decision or action build goodwill for the company? Will this decision build goodwill? Will it create a good reputation for the company? And number four question is the decision or action beneficial to all parties who have vested interest in the outcome? Will this decision or action beneficial to all parties who have vested interest in the company? This is one way. And if the answer to these four questions, if they are yes, it is likely that that decision or action is an ethical one. Number two is publicity test. We are looking at how you can determine whether an action is ethical or not. This one, you cannot skip through it. You will see it in the exam. They will not write it, but as you are reading the question, and the way you see it, the thing is that number one, you first do first reading of your question. When you are doing the second reading of your question, you are going out there to look at what are the ethical issues in this question. What are the ethical issues? Because compulsorily, candidates are expected to identify ethical issues and let it form basis of your discussion. They are part of things they will look out for. They are part of things that the examiner is expecting you to write, to state out. Number two is publicity test. Use of publicity test is number two. How to determine if and whether an action is ethical or not. Publicity test is asking whether the decision or action, if published in the local or national newspaper, what would the public say? What would be the reaction of the member of public if it's being published in a national newspaper? That is publicity test. Asking yourself that this action, this thing that this company want to do, if they publish it in national newspaper, what would be the reaction of the general public? That is publicity test. Number three, test on how to know how to determine if an action is ethical or not. Number three is what we call American Accounting Association test. That is a seven question approach, seven question approach model. Number one is four-way test model. Number two is publicity test model. Number three is seven question test model, which is called American Accounting Association AAA. This test is asking seven questions. Use the seven questions to ascertain if an action is ethical or not. Number one question, establish the fact of the case. First of all, establish the fact of the case. Number two, identify ethical issues in the case. Identify ethical issues in the case. Number three, identification of norms, principle, and value relating to the case. Number four is identify the course of action. Each course of action that can be taken. That, okay, what are the course of action involved? If we did not do this, what else can we do? Number five is matching the principles and value to options. matching the principles and value to options available. Number 6, consequence of the outcome must be considered. Consideration of the consequence of the outcome. That's number 6. Remember, we are looking at the 7 question model. 7 question test model. We say question 1, establish the fact of the case. Question 2, identify ethical issue in the case. Question 3, identification of principles and value relating to the case. Number 4, alternative course of action. Identify the alternative course of action. Number 5, match the principles and value, match it to the options available. Don't forget, we said business ethics is principle based. Number 6, consequence of the outcome. Consider the consequence of the action. And number 7, take decision. Take appropriate decision. Take appropriate decision. Take appropriate decision. I'm going to number 4. Number 4, under how to determine whether an action is ethical. We say there are 4 tests. 4-way test model. That's number 1. Number 2, publicity test model. Number 2. Number 3, 7 question test model, which is AAA, American Accounting Association. And number 4 is Tucker's test model. Tucker's test model. That is 5 question test model. 5 question test model. Under the Tucker's test model, what are these 5 questions? What are these 5 questions? Number 1 is that you look at the action at, is this action profitable? Is the action profitable? That's number 1. Number 2, you look at, is it legal? Is it legal? Is it legitimate? That's number 2. Number 3, you look at, is it fair? Is it fair to everyone? Number 4, is it right? Is it right? Is it a right thing to be done? That's number 4. And number 5, you say, is this action sustainable? Is it sustainable? Is it environmentally sound? Those are the 5 question test model. Those are the 5 um, question test model. I'm going to come back to this model and give us example. We'll have a discussion and if time permits us and see how it work out. But I have more other important things to discuss, so I'm going to move on quickly. Now, I want us to take note that the issue of business ethics in case study, what the examiner wants, they expect candidates to assemble the answer to an ethical issue within the context of the case study. The examiner wants the candidate, the student, to assemble, identify ethical issue, provide an answer to them within the context of the case study. Now, an examiner expects candidates to develop an answer base to demonstrate his professional skill when answering questions on ethical issue. That is, what we are saying here is that what the now let's get this aspect right. There is something that examiner is looking for when it comes to ethical consideration or ethical matter. The examiner wants the student to provide a convincing structured analysis to the issue. The examiner wants the student to provide a convincing, structured analysis to the ethical issue identified in the case study. The examiner wants to know how well an ethical issue have been identified. Students are expected to identify the ethical issue in the case study. Number two, the students are expected to explain the ethical issue, identify them, and explain them. Number three, you are meant to what? Express professional judgment. What do you think? How should they tackle? That's why I say we are coming to solve a question for us to see if I'm using seven question model or five question model test to answer how will I go about it. It is now left for you to decide. But what the examiner wants, don't forget your ability to identify the ethical issue. That's why they will not write it and they will not, nobody will say these are the ethical issue. No. Your ability to identify the ethical issue, your ability to analyze it, your ability to profile judgment, that is solution, to make recommendation that this is what they should do, this is the way it should have been done. That is where you get your mark when it comes to ethical issue in case study exam. In case study exam. If you look at case study question, what the examiner normally do, they will give us four important keywords that you should look out for. What are the four words? How to know ethical requirements in a case study. How to know ethical requirements. Number one, lack, lack. Number two, conflict. Number three, doubtful and inappropriate. These four things, they normally state it as part of the question. It is always come with the preceding question. The four specific area of ethical consideration: lack of professional independence and objectivity, conflict of interest among stakeholders, doubtful accounting or commercial practice, inappropriate pressure to achieve a reported result. This one is always given in the question. That's not where we are going. Where we are going is that I'm going to give us 8 important keynotes under ethical issue. How to identify ethical issue embedded in a case study. Number one keynote, under the keynotes, I'm going to give you, there are 8 points. I want us to take notes. Number one, I want you to know that ethical issues usually form part of the requirement. That is, after broad reading, the second reading you are reading, when you are reading your case study, you must be able to pick out. You must read with view of picking out potential ethical issues. Ethical issue, just like the way, if you know the way that we normally have executive summary, ethical issues are not like that. It is under requirement one. After you have get your finding, you need to state what are the ethical issues in the matter. So what that one, number one, is saying that issue of ethical consideration, it usually form part of the requirement, which typically ask candidate to discuss the organization operational and strategical matter. If you look at under your responsibility, they will say there is a page they will say you should discuss operational and strategic matter or activities of the company. you we have to know that, okay, for ethical issue, it does not come as a separate on its own, or something that, like the way we have executive summary and no, it come as part of the question, and you are the one to bring it out. That is number one. Number two, ethical issue oftentimes does not have numeric composition. You don't have to do any calculation. The only place where you can be asked to do numeric calculation for ethical issue is where there is an ethical issue and the company has suffered loss, and they have given you some data. They now want you to calculate what is the cost implication if they did not take certain decision. That is, if they did not do it right, what will be the cost implication? To do it right, what will be the cost implication? That is the only way. But oftentimes, most cases, ethical issue or ethical matter, ethical requirement, they are in theoretical form. They are often not in numeric form. Let's take note of that. But that is not to say that it cannot, or it can never come in a computational form or in a numeric form. But take note that oftentimes it comes in a theoretical form. Number three, Number three is that in the exam, when you are discussing ethical issue, don't discuss it from your personal point of view. Discuss it from the company's point of view. If you are representing an audit firm, discuss it how the ethical issue will affect your client business, not you as individual. Please, this is where many students make mistake in exam. Whenever they are discussing ethical issue, they are discussing it how it affects them as a person. No, it's wrong. You have to discuss ethical issue the way it affects the business of the client. That is number 3 point you have to know. When you are giving recommendation, give it in the way it will affect the business of the client that you are making recommendation for. You are serving on, you are you are working for. Number 4, you must identify the audience. If you're, for example, if you are being asked to report to a board of director as a O, this board of director may have, different individual with different interests. That means that the director may have different interests. Therefore, it means that you need to you need to be careful in the type of advice you will prefer. That is where we say identify the audience. That one I'm still going to say it next week. When next week we are going into report writing. It's still part of thing we are going to discuss. Identify the audience. Who am I writing this report to? So that when you are making recommendation on ethical issue, you make recommendation on how it affects your client business, your audience. No, okay, if you are an audit firm, you are working in an audit firm, and your audit firm has a client, they now ask you to write the report. You cannot be writing your ethical issue the way it affects your firm. No, you write it the way it affects the client of your firm and the managing director of those companies. Please, this is very important. This is where many are missing it. Ethical issue will not always raise a red flag. Ethical issue will not, sometimes we may think ethical issue is when the company is doing something that is not right. Sometimes ethical issue will come, what are the things that are right that the company is doing that is ethical issue? That's what we mean by sometimes ethical issue will not raise a red flag. Most time we always think, oh, what is the bad thing? What are the wrong decisions the company has taken, or what is the wrong thing they are doing that I can pick out as ethical issue? No, sometimes it may be good things that they are doing that is ethical. It may be that they are paying their staff salary on time. It may be that they are always time to client meeting. It may be the way they treat their clients that will form an ethical issue. That's why we first of all define what is ethics, what is business ethics. It is actions that constitute the culture of the organization. They will give you the background of the client. They will give you the culture of the firm. Those information, you need them to be able to ascertain which action align with the culture of the firm, which action does not align with the culture of the firm, in order to determine ethical consideration, ethical issues. Ethical issue will not always come as a red flag. Let's take note of that. Number 6, you must have ability to recognize the link or contradiction within and between the exhibit. Hmm. Let's take note of this. You must have ability to recognize the linkage and or contradiction. If they give you, that is why you must read exhibit 1, exhibit 2. Sometimes they will put one information in exhibit 1. They will put another information in exhibit 2 or exhibit 6. You must be able to link how those information interconnect to form an ethical issue, or how those information contradict that becomes an ethical issue. That is number 6. Ability to recognize the linkage or contradiction within or between exhibits. Sometimes they will give you up to 10 exhibits, sometimes 12. Those exhibits, they are not for fun. No. Those additional information, they are not for play. They are for you to read it and link them together. What information in exhibit 1 link information 10. That is how you can be able, you must be able to link them together. You must be able to link information they are giving you in the pre-seen, how it relates to information they are giving you in the unseen. You must read them together and be able to articulately bring out the points. That is number 6. Number 7, ability to apply what is called diplomatic professional judgment in ethical consideration. I will say it again. Ability to apply diplomatic professional judgment. Diplomatic professional judgment. That is what that means is that what is good in one place is bad in one place. For example, some people believe that women should not wear trousers. I just use that. Some people believe that there is nothing wrong if women wear trousers. Sometimes, some things that in Nigeria, our culture does not allow it. For example, if in Nigeria now, if you just see a boy and a girl, they are kissing in the public. In Nigeria, it's a big deal. People will be looking at that. What's wrong with this one? Why are you kissing in the public? But if you go to UK, America, they do it normal, as in nobody even cares whether you kiss or whatever you do. Ethical consideration in one company. Don't forget, that's why I say it is this ethical principle that forms the culture of the company. So what is wrong in one place is acceptable in another place. That is what we are saying. So you must be diplomatic when you are giving your professional judgment to ethical issues. That is number 7. Number 8, which is the final point, the ability to identify and analyze ethical issues must be relevant in all the things you are doing. Make sure that when you're identifying and you're analyzing ethical issues, it must be relevant to the requirement of the question. Don't just be identifying ethical issues that are not relevant to the requirement of the question. Your focus must be on the requirement, the true requirement of the question. What did the examiner ask me to do? This ethical consideration, it does it relate to the requirement of the question? If it does not relate, don't waste your time identifying it. Whatever you are writing, make sure it relates to the main requirement of the question. If not, it will be effort in futility. Those are the important 8 points I have drawn out to share with us. When you are identifying ethical issue, make sure that it's relevant to the requirement of the question, to the requirement of the case study. Make sure that you must be able to link what they said in note 1, in exhibit 1 and exhibit 5. You must be able to link them together so that there might be things they say, oh, the company normally do this. They will come in exhibit 5. They will say, and the company has not done this. It may be a contradiction. It may be a linkage. A linkage means something that is supporting what they have already said. A contradiction means want something they are doing now that contradicts what they have said in exhibit 1. You must be able to link them together. So don't read the exhibit in isolation. The exhibits are deliberately numbered 1, 2, 3 for sequential. Deliberately, they are all interwoven, interlinked. So you don't read them in isolation. You must read them together and see how they interlink and interwoven. That is what we are saying. That is what we are saying. It's very important. You must be able to link them together. You must be diplomatic in your response. You must be diplomatic. You must consider your audience. These are the key things that make people feel under ethical consideration. Consider your audience. Who am I writing this report to? It is the person you are. You know that in communication is two-way, it's not one way. If I communicate to somebody, I must receive feedback that shows that the person understands what I'm saying. That is the same way. If you don't understand your audience, your recommendation will be wrong because you are making recommendation to a wrong audience. You are not considered the person you are giving the a recommendation to. That is why we will take time next class under report writing to ability to identify your audience. Who am I writing the report to? Who is the recipient of this report? So that your professional judgment, your recommendation, it will be channeled towards the recipient of the report. Those are the things the examiner is looking for. Those are the control area. They are looking for anybody that misses it, cannot pass the paper. You must be able to get it right from that thing. As little, as simple as it is, you must get it right. Get the audience right. Even when you are identifying your ethical issue, you must be able to link them together. You must be able to know. And we said that most cases, some cases, ethical issue does not come as a red flag. It does not mean what the company is not doing right. It may be what the company is doing right. That is an ethical issue. That is why you must understand what are the things that form an ethical issue. Those are the things: integrity, conflict of interest, those things, inappropriate pressure to achieve a desired result, conflict of interest among stakeholders. That's why we say all of that. So that when you see things, it's time has gone. I will have given us other example, other these 7. Lack of professional independence and objectivity. Those are the things you will see and link them together. Sometimes it may not come as a red flag. It may not come as what the company is not doing right. It may come as what the company is doing right, that you need to identify and recognize that the company is doing it right. We are going to stop for today's class. Those are the things that are most important. If you look at lack of professional intelligence, you look at like failure to ensure that your advice is in the best interest of the individual or the company you are working for. Abuse of confidentiality, it shows lack of professional independence. Abuse of confidentiality. If your role is one in which you are working on a secondment, compromising yourself in the work you deliver is a lack of professional independence. We have a lot of them. Under doubtful accounting, we have aggressive attitude towards your supplier. It's a symptoms of doubtful commercial practice. Imposition of unfair contract term. Imposition of unfair contract term. Health and safety issue. They are doubtful commercial practice. Abuse of customer information, divulging your customer information, it is a doubtful commercial practice. Misuse of commercial intelligence or breach of copyright is a doubtful commercial practice. Misleading advertisement, what your firm cannot do, what the company, when you let them say the company have not started doing it, but they are advertising that they can do it, is a doubtful commercial practice. There are things that point to ethical issues. Inappropriate pressure to achieve, that is manipulation of key performance indicator. Questionable bad debt provision policy. Questionable bad debt provision policy is an inappropriate pressure to achieve result. Abuse of cutoff. If our cutoff is 31st December, you are still allowing people up to 1st, 2nd of the new year. Abuse of cutoff. Potential bias in forecast or business plan to support application of a loan. Biasness in forecast or business plan to support application of a loan is a is a doubtful commercial practice. It's an inappropriate pressure to achieve a profit. Misclassification of item in the financial statement to ensure compliance with the bank covenant or with the government policy. Misrepresentation, they are all inappropriate pressure to achieve a desired result. They are all pointer to ethical issues. That is where we're going to stop for today. Thank you. If you have question, quickly ask your question. Thank you. Gift, well done. Go ahead, ask your question.
Yeah, good.
After gift, then go. Josephine will go.
Okay, good evening, sir. Thank you.
Yes. Good evening.
Please, I want to know when it comes to ethical issues, like the questions, does it mean it does not involve report writing? That you will not be expected to write reports on the ethical issues um identified? Is it in a report format or it comes like question and answer?
Oh, if I understand your question, okay, you can mute yourself. So the way ethical issue comes, it comes like how do I put it? It comes, you know that in a report under requirement one. Now, the ethical issue for requirement one is always different from ethical issue under requirement two, and you must state them separately. We are saying that under the subheading, Under requirement one, you will state your observations and finding. You will state your conclusions. So under requirements, if it is calculation, you will state your financial ratios and all of that. You explain what are the conclusions you drawn. You must state your conclusion. Are you getting it? After stating, you must make your recommendation. We are going to get to that under report writing. We have two classes for report writing. We'll go in depth to each, but we'll start with executive summary. So under one of it, after you are going to state your ethical consideration. What are the ethical issues that you have pinpointed? Are we together? So you need to state it. Because when you are now finally making recommendation, there are things that you must talk about, but you must state it on as a subheading. But it doesn't come separately on its own. It forms part of your writing when you are responding, when you are providing solutions to the question, to the problem you have identified. I don't know whether you get my point. I
Yeah,
don't know whether you get me.
in other words, it's still report format, even though
Yes,
it's
now.
tested on ethical issue, but you still follow the same report
Yes.
format.
Yes. It's the same. You still follow the same for report format. Yes.
Okay.
Josephine, go ahead. Ask your question quickly.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are you today?
Hi, sir. Sir, my question is because I was discussing with somebody that have written this case study before, that
Yes.
this pristine, is it an example of what you're going to see, or is it will form part of the question you're going to answer in the unseen?
It will form part of it. It's like they've given you some part of the information. It will form part of it.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. It's just that they will have hidden most of some things. You understand? They will have hidden something under the unseen. They will now unveil them in the exam. And the reason why they are doing that, they usually hide a lot is that so that some people will not come into the exam hall with a prepared solution. They want you to come and think for yourself and apply yourself to answer the question. They don't want to give too much that people will now, they will have solved it for them outside. They will now come into the exam with the solution and just dub it and say I've passed. No, they want them to think. That's why they hide a lot. So that when they release it in the unseen, they want you to read the question, what you have read before, and the new information, read it together. And how do you see? How can you provide solution? They now want you to do it, write it out. That's it.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. So, in the absence of no any other question, okay, I can see Edward. Edward, quickly go ahead. Ask your question. Edward, go ahead. Edward, are you there? Okay, Olusheyi, please ask your question. Olusheyi, you are raising your hand. Is he there?
Good evening, sir.
Okay, good
Hello,
evening.
good evening, sir. Yeah, thank you
Good
very
evening.
much
I can hear
for.
you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, sir.
You
Please,
are
I want to
welcome.
ask this question. I want to ask this question. Let's assume that under the case study, the kind of question is related to confidentiality under the behavioral of an accountant. And the kind of question that they are asking us is related to confidentiality. But can we say under that, can we relate our answer? I don't know whether you are getting my question, sir.
No, I'm trying to get your question.
Hello, sir.
Hello, I'm trying to get your question.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Maybe the question they are asking is related to confidentiality
Okay.
of a professional behavior of an accountant.
Okay.
But when we want to answer the question, we are now relating it to professional behavior or professional due care. Can we do that, sir?
Okay, you see, under ethical issue, it's
Okay.
rare for a question of confidentiality to come up, because even if it come up, don't forget we said that ethical issue, they will not ask a question that deals with your personal, professional, professional thing. Confidentiality is deal with person, you as an auditor, as an a professional accountant. But even let's say they now ask, the question is that does it affect the client business? When you are stating it, you have to state it the way it will affect the business you are auditing or you are examining. I don't know whether you get my point. The way that confidentiality, how it
Get.
will affect, not the way it affects you, not the way it affects, the way it
Okay.
affects that business you are affecting, the
Okay.
implication
Okay.
it will
Okay.
have on the
Okay.
business and to the public.
Business.
If that thing should be
All right.
public, if
All
that
right.
that is the way you should write it, not the way it affects you or the way it affects your firm. It is the way it affects your
Okay. Okay.
client
With no.
business. That is it.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Good,
Thank you
good
very
evening,
much. I
sir.
get it.
Edward, go ahead.
Okay, sir, is it compulsory that in every case scenario we must have ethical issues?
The answer is yes. Every requirement one and requirement two, it have once you state your findings. After the findings, what next is to state your ethical issues. Is it in every case? Yes. It's deliberate. You understand? It's deliberate because
Yeah.
there is a standard. There is a standard way. So they normally hide it there. So you have to write ethical issue or consideration must come before writing your conclusion and recommendation. So going back to your question, is it in every case? Yes.
Okay,
It
sir.
will you will see it in requirement one, it is we see it in requirement two. And they will not specifically ask you that what are the ethical. You are the one to identify them. They will have hidden it in the question, in the exhibit they will give you. You are the one to identify it and bring them out.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So that is it. We're going to call it a class for this one. You can read up more on that ethical issue. Then finally, before we go, one of us asked a question last time about when we treated model, about the topic I treated, that she can't find it in the park. I have checked, it's not in the park. So I want you to take those points I added as just a top up for you. If like they normally say that no information is useless, or so let's just take it, it's not in the pack. It's because what happens, I have different material on case study that I usually read to prepare for my class. So I was picking um some of the model that is in that material. That's although I treated the one that are in the pack, I've treated benchmarking, value chain, SWOT, Pestel, Michael Porter's 5 diamond. I've treated competitive advance. I've treated that one. Those three. Asnoff, we treated as off. Yes, that one is in the park. We have treated one. So those Mendelos and one other one I mentioned, this one they are just addition. They are not in the park. So you can just take note if you eventually, they say no information is waste or is lost. So if you eventually use it, it's fine. If happen that you will not need it, it's fine. Just know it. No knowledge is lost. So just know it, but it's not in the pack. So I promised that I was going to check and answer. So I just say, let me quickly clarify that it wasn't in the pack. So it was just in my own pack that I brought them. So if you just feel that you will not need it, you may just leave it out. That is it. So I want to say thank you. We are going to call it a class now. Thank you very much. See you in the next class when we are going to start our report writing proper. Thank you very much. Have a very good evening. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
Very much, sir.